UFC 308 is in the books. It took place at the Etihad Arena in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. In the main event, Ilia Topuria defeats Max Holloway via KO at 134 of round number 3. Both rounds were pretty competitive. I want to talk about each of them in a minute. I want to wait till all of the data from Fight Metric gets uploaded. But let me start with a bit of a different preamble, if I may. There was some debate this year, and I think that people think that there's not debate, but I believe that there's debate. That who is fighter of the year? Who is that? Who is fighter of the year? And to me, the answer is Ilia Topuria. He didn't fight as many times as Alex Pereira, who fought more regularly, and also, we should be very clear, under very suboptimal conditions. Like, what he was able to pull off is incredible. And in fact, if you had to vote and you voted for Poatan as your fighter of the year, I would argue that there's a decent case for that, certainly. And I would also argue that like the role he served to carry the UFC this year was more pivotal than anybody else. I will grant that. But even though he has 3 wins and Ilia only has 2, Ilia's 2 wins are over the former pound-for-pound #1 guy in the fucking sport, and Alexander Volkanovski polished him off inside 2, and then Max Holloway becoming the first guy to knock Max down and then officially stop him with strikes. Right? We're talking about somebody of a different level, and I hope everyone can look at this win today from Ilia Topuria and recognize something, which I've been saying this whole time, and I feel like finally proved to be quite true. There were people who wanted to discount the value of what he did against Volkanovski the first time, because Volkanovski did take that fight under suboptimal conditions, right? He had just been head kick KO'd up a weight class by Islam, took that fight on short notice, and then made way too quick of a turnaround to really last against a guy like Ilia Topuria. But how can you look at Topuria and the power and the precision that he turned in today in turning off the lights of Max Holloway, which was honestly hard to watch? I did not enjoy that. I mean, I'm happy for Ilia Topuria, but like watching Max like that, I did not like that. It was almost like watching a friend. That was actually kind of hard to watch. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you can put out the lights of Max Holloway, nobody else stands a chance. Not to say nobody could beat him, but in terms of like standing up to the power and what he can offer, nobody else can do that. So to me, it's like, I get and I understand that, yes, Volk took that fight under suboptimal conditions. He wasn't walking out of that octagon with that belt that night. It was going to be a matter of time before Ilia put hands on him, and as soon as he did, he could not stand up to that power. I don't think anybody can stand up to his power at 145. That doesn't mean he's invincible. That's really not what I'm saying. But if he lands what he landed on Max on literally any other featherweight, it's over. It's over for them. It's curtains. They're not going to make it. Right? Beating Volkanovski and Max Holloway and finishing them both via KO in the same calendar year, to me, is way, way, way more difficult, vastly more difficult than any other, at a bare minimum, 2 other fighter combination that anyone else has. And Poatan obviously has the 3rd, but I'm sorry, beating up guys like Yuri, yes, I know he's a former champion, but he literally doesn't use defense. Like, to me, that just doesn't count as much. And you know, in general at light heavyweight, I certainly think those guys are good, but they're not elite like Max Holloway, Jamal Hill, Yuri, and Khalil Roundtree. These are good fighters, some better than others, but they're good. They're not elite like Volkanovski. They're not elite like Max. And he polished both of them off. This is a different level of power puncher in the UFC. And it's not just pure power. It is technique. It is timing. It is angle change. It is precision. It is accuracy. It is all of the above. And he is beating guys. I mean, literally, Ilia this year KO'd, and you heard Max, no excuses. Ilia literally KO'd 2 all-time greats. Fuck Hall of Famers. I mean, yes, of course they're Hall of Famers. 2 all-time greats. and he KO'd him in back-to-back fights. That alone, to me, is more impressive than beating, yes, talented, good fighters, and on short notice. I mean, that's tough. I'm not saying it's like some walk in the park. It's tough. But I think that's an easier task than it is to wipe out two all-time greats in the sport. I genuinely believe that. So I hope that when folks consider where Ilia falls, there's not to say that there's no case for Poatan. There, of course, is a case. If you have 3 KOs or 3, whatever it is, TKOs, if I don't know how they're classified, but he stopped all 3 guys with strikes. I mean, that's goddamn impressive. And in ways Ilia never did, Poatan carried the sport on his back this year. Like, I get that. But like, what is more difficult, to beat 3 good fighters or to beat 2 all-time greats back-to-back and stop both of them? To me, my vote would go to Ilia Topuria. Okay, with that preamble out of the way, let's talk about the fight itself. And I want to take a look at some of these results if I can. I'm going to pull these up. Let's see here from Fight Metric. Yeah, I got it right here. Let's take a look. Okay, I think we have the results in. They credited Ilia with 2 takedowns. Oh, that's right, because he had the 1 takedown, then he got him again the second time. Let me blow up some of these numbers so y'all there you can see them. All right, let's take a look at some of these numbers if we can here. I'm going to show them to you just like that. Okay, so these are the results from our friends over at Fight Metric. All right. Topuria gets the knockdown over Max Holloway. That's the first one of those that's ever happened. He was kind of out-volumed in significant strike, although he landed 52% of them. He's credited with the 2 takedowns, almost no control time. He didn't do much with them. Let's take a look round by round. Max was definitely busier both rounds, although the second round was much closer. He got the 2 takedowns there. So again, this round to me felt like more of a Max round. Second round was a little bit harder to tell, but I think you could score the first 2 rounds for Max. They're narrow. They're definitely narrow, but you could do it. It wouldn't be too crazy. It would be a question of less so quantitative totals and more qualitative totals. Depending on how you want to look at that. But then the third round, of course, is where everything came off the rails. 21-14, again, quantitative totals. But I want to see about the targeting of the head. Max, this is the head strikes. Max targeted the head 13, 20, and 16. Excuse me, Ilia. 13, 20, and 16 on the first. 17 by Max, 23 in the second one, and then 7. Obviously, the round got away from him. Let's take a look at the targeting here if we can. Yeah, so you guys can see it. All right, Ilia is in the red, and Max is in the blue. 65, 14, 20 for him. And then for Max, 59, 16, and 20. I mean, almost identical percentages. I mean, a little bit less to the leg for Ilia, a little bit more to the body for Max, but it's pretty similar. Here's what I want to see. What did Ilia's performance against Volkanovski look like in terms of percentages? Yeah, look at this. Much more to the leg. About the same to the body, much less to the head. So he was actually, excuse me, that's Volkanovski. What am I saying? Other way. But even then, it's the same thing. To the leg and to the head, it went much less to the head. So he was headhunting. Ilia was a little bit more this time. He wasn't doing as much body work. We had said pre-fight, let's talk about the rounds themselves. We had said pre-fight, my thought was one of the hardest things for Ilia was going to be kind of finding Max. Certainly cornering him was going to be difficult. We thought there might be some grappling. You did see some evidence of that, but really it was not in any way very consequential. I thought the hardest thing for Ilia was going to be to find Max, right? Max is good. You saw off the jab and then the angle change, or jab, pull, go again, then turn, right? Just kind of being in your face, busy with the work, making you work as a consequence, kind of countering you, finding you all over the top just by touch, 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 go, touch, 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 go, pull, go, right? Changing rhythm, but just constantly being busy and making you work while he's moving, while he's turning, while he's retaking center. I thought in general, he did a pretty good job of that. They had clearly looked at that high-low game that Ilia is very, very good at. He plays high-low, side to side on everything. Have you guys noticed that? So many times, like in the Volkanovski fight, he plays high-low, high-low. Oh, right hand's going to go low. They think it's going to go low. Then he switches up the rhythm and then the combination, and then he goes high, and then it crashes into him. And then all of a sudden, the show is over. Right? That's really how it goes. You got a lot of that here as well. So they clearly had a game where they were going to use the rear leg of Max, both the front kick up the middle, kind of like, showing him that knee. So if he comes in too low and goes to the body and then reaches across to find him, they were going to intercept him. I think that deterred him a little bit to the body, although eventually he had a couple of decent body shots. I think in that late second, early third round, there was some good stuff. It was some jabs to the body, but he wasn't able to get a whole lot going. Again, Max playing a very good distance game, kind of entering the range on his terms a little bit more than I think Ilia was prepared for. And the volume overall of Max was a clear thing that was going pretty well for him. Not everything was landing consequential, but to the extent it could disrupt Ilia, you saw some evidence of that, to the extent that, by the way, he could counter over the top of the jab of Ilia. You saw some evidence of that as well. Again, cutting angles, not being where he needed him to be, fighting off the takedown. Dude, Max looked good. He didn't look bad. It was a close fight for as long as it lasted, up until that one big shot landed. But he fought pretty well. I mean, he fought really well, actually. I would have to say. He was able to put a little bit more numerical volume on him. He was able to move with general effectiveness. He was able to, up until the third round, stay out of the way of the big one, or at least, there was a couple times he would curl into the left side of Ilia Topuria and then keep that hand up so that he wouldn't run into it, and that saved him a couple times. I mean, there was a few of those shots that probably could have turned his lights out, but they didn't, because he had great defense. The problem is with Ilia, man, it's like all that stuff, kind of worked halfway in the first round. Some stuff got through, some hard shots got through in the second, but it wasn't, nothing really was making Max super, like he didn't rock Max and then Max had to get, so for example, like Dustin Poirier would land on him, right? And it would stun him, and then he would kind of be reeling, and then Poirier would kind of pour it on, you know what I mean? And so he'd have to follow. Ilia was never really able to land a whole lot like that up until the third. And then he landed that right hand over the top, and it looked to me, because you had Max with both hands out, and Ilia on the replay was going to hand trap. A hand trap is almost like when you're peeling the guard. So if someone has their hands here and then the opponent comes, you can, by the way, you can grab the glove in MMA, but obviously in boxing, what they tend to do is they tend to grab here and then pull, right? And then it comes across the top, and then they can score. You saw a fair amount of evidence of that, or at least in that particular one. And then you could see Max on the other side had his hand down. It looked to me like he was trying to parry or circle parry or get obstruct something that was going to come to the body. And instead he came over the top. So I have to go and review the footage, but it looked to me like he had Max fooled a little bit from what he'd been throwing previously, which is, again, I don't know if it's the exact same combination as what he threw to put Volkanovski away, but that particular dimension of getting him used to going to the body, and then switching it up off the combo, and then changing the timing off the combo to then come up to the top. He did it. And I'll say this too, man. I was really wondering, like, is Ilia really going to be able to consistently find Max behind the black line? The Volkanovski KO behind the black line. Damon Jackson KO behind the black line. I mean, you can go on down the list. How many times did he drop Emmett? Almost all of them, I think, were behind the black line. The Bryce Mitchell fight, he dropped him, moving him behind the black line. Like, it's just where he does most of his work. Some guys can just drop you right in the middle. It looks like he needs a little bit of stepping through to get some momentum to really get the kind of shots he wants off. But once he does, it's a wrap. What I'm trying to point out is I wasn't sure he was going to consistently be able to do that. And he did do it a few times. Again, Max kind of saving himself a few times with good defense. But here was a great example. Like, you can't if you're going to beat Ilia Topuria, you cannot spend hardly any time operating there, because it constrains your choices. Your choices are basically left or right. It's not so much forward, back, or cutting at different angles. Or it just there's so much more offensive and defensive options when you have space and real estate to move. When you don't, or you're backpedaling. And again, it's not just a function of putting them back there, but then changing the location of where people think it's coming, and then coming over the top and then absolutely fucking cracking them. And dude, if Max Holloway can't take your punch, I'm not sure I understand who can at 145 anyway. I don't really know who that would be. And then, again, I can't overstate it enough. It looks like he just kind of fades over this way, but you go back and you look at the Volkanovski KO, he had him backed up and he kind of crashed into him. He then reset over here and then finished him off from there. And then that was the shot that put him off. So he is able to slightly reset the angle to finish while guys are still in transition to follow and turn. And that's what gives him these blinding shots that they just don't see coming. And that was the second shot. The first one, I think, was off the high-low and what he was anticipating. The second one was resetting the angle, and then Max was kind of facing this way, and then the punch comes over this way. I mean, if Max can see the punch coming and kind of can defend or roll with it, he's probably going to be okay, you know? It was working until it wasn't. Or at least it was very competitive and good simply until it wasn't.